if you were looking to sketch this graph right here, okay, the first thing is you know you're going to be dealing with a cosine. So I know this is the tool I'm going to use. Okay, and what I would do is I would use this horizontal line tool at my midline. My midline is this number, that's the vertical shift. So the first thing I would do is select the line, and I would draw my midline right here. Okay. Once I have my midline, what I'm then going to use is my amplitude of 6. I'm going to go 6 units up. So there's my max. I'm going to go 6 units down. There's my minimum. Okay, so that's the next step. Use the amplitude to find my max and min. Okay, I'm then going to find my period. Is there any multiplier in front of my x? No, so I know my period is going to be 2 pi. Okay, but before I actually go through to sort of calculate that, what I need to do is see my shifting. So here, my phase shift is I'm moving what? What value of x gives you a 0 inside here? 7 pi over 6. So each of these represents pi over 6. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pi over 6. Okay, and so once I get my shift, what I can then do is use my period. 2 pi is going to be how many total pi over 6 is 2 pi going to be? From here to what? 2 pi is 12 pi over 6. So if I start at negative 7, I have to move over how many to the right? How many over 6? 5 pi over 6, right? So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I go all the way to here. So from here to here is going to be 1 period. Okay, and so knowing that, I can now start to plot my points. So I'm using the cosine function. So my first point is either a maximum or a minimum. Since it's a positive in front, it's going to be a maximum. So at this location right here, I'm at a maximum. So here's the first point. Now, what I'm going to do with my period is I'm going to cut it in half. So if I cut this in half right here, and I'm going to cut each of those halves in half. So these are where my critical points are going to fall. And so I start with my maximum. My next one is the midline. My next one is my minimum. My next line is my midline again, and then finally back to my maximum. So this is what my sketch of the graph is going to look like. Okay, I completed 1 period within 2 pi. Okay, I fit in all of the shifting that occurs inside there. Now, keeping in mind that I was building this with the cosine function, I'm going to place my first point here, my second point at the minimum, and then it will continue the graph for the remaining parts. Okay. So the way I would recommend you approach a problem like this is first select your horizontal line tool, draw the midline. So I would first put my midline along here, -3, whatever the vertical shift is. Okay. Then I would look at my horizontal shifting. I see here that, or actually I'm going to mark my max and min. So my amplitude is 4, so I'm going to go up 4 units and down 4 units from my midline so that I can mark my max and min. So that's this part. So I've taken into consideration both the vertical components. I'm now going to look at the horizontal component. So as far as my shift that occurs, what value of x gives you a 0 inside here? 7 pi over 6. So I'm going to start here, 7 pi over 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pi over 6. So when I mark this off, if I know that my period is 2 pi divided by whatever is in front of my x, so it's just a 1, so 2 pi is my period. So how many more pi over 6 do I need to reach that? The -5, right? So this gives me my total period of 2 pi, or 12 pi over 6. Okay, and so I can cut that in half once, and then cut each of those in half to get my critical points. Okay, and so once I have my critical points, I can then use just the tendencies of my graph. So I'm going to start right here. So I'm going to start at the beginning of my period, the period right here. Even though I shifted it here, I moved it back. So this is my first point in the sine graph. My first point comes on the midline. So I'm going to sketch that point. And then normally I would go up and then midline, then down. But because of the negative out front, I'm not going to start with a max. I'm going to start with a min. So my next critical point is going to be a minimum. My next critical point is going to be midline. My next critical point is going to be a maximum. My next middle or critical point is going to be a midline again. So this is what my sketch looks like for one period of this graph. Okay, and once again, as far as the way that it will be designated, midline to extreme. Okay, and so that is how my graph's going to look.